This shirt sums up my life. Ugh. This video is not going to be for everybody. I realize that not everybody reads books, and that's perfectly okay. But I read a lot of books this year, and a lot of really good books, and I have to talk about them because I love talking about the things that I love. So my whole life I've been a fan of books. I attribute this to my parents who read to me a ton as a kid, and I always had books around, and ever since I was a kid I've always read. I read a funny article once that says never date a book reader because we can always entertain ourselves, and that's so true. I 9 times out of 10 would prefer to stay home and read a book than do anything else. Which is exactly why when I saw this shirt I was like, yeah, that's me in a nutshell. T-Turtle, if you ever sponsor YouTubers, let me raise my hand. Eventually, we'll, you know, I'm all here. I will wear your t-shirts all the time. So last year, I read a good amount of books. Not a crazy amount. I don't even remember how many actually. But at the end of last year, I decided that I was gonna set myself a goal for 2017 on Goodreads. Goodreads is an amazing website that tracks your reading progress, what books you're reading. All you have to do is open a book on Kindle and it marks it as currently reading on Goodreads. So you don't even have to do anything. It does it all for you. She keeps dropping her ball. And it's fantastic because it keeps track of everything. You can update your progress, you can add friends, and I've added friends, people that I've posted on my Twitter, and people are now we're friends, and now I can see what they're reading, they can see what I'm reading, and I can write reviews and all kinds of fun things. If you guys want to be friends with me on Goodreads, I put my link in the description below. I highly recommend it if you want to get into reading more, or if you just want to track your progress, or if you already have a Goodreads, then add me. But last year I decided I was going to set myself a challenge for 2017, and I decided on 30 books. The only reason I decided on 30 books is because one of my other friends on there also put 30 books, and I was like, that's a good number. So I decided on 30 books, and I was actually doing okay. I read a few books here and there throughout the year, and then I had 2 really big reading periods where I read a ton of books. One was in the springtime, I believe. I read a bunch of books, and then one was, and it's actually still going on right now, pretty much in the winter. I guess I read a lot in the winter just because maybe it's colder and I go outside less. I don't know, but that would make the most sense. So in fact, I only had about 20 books coming into, I think, mid to end November. So I had a whole bunch of books that I needed to finish. I needed to finish like 10 books in a month. The good thing though is that I tend to start a lot of books and I get halfway through and I don't finish them, or I pick up another book. So I have a lot of books that are in progress. I think on my Goodreads I have over 20 books in progress. So I was able to kind of just wrap up a whole bunch of those and hit my goal of 30. Yay! In fact, I have 31 right now. I'm about to finish 32. It's only the 28th, so that I should probably finish tonight or tomorrow. And I think I even have a 3rd book of an audiobook that's almost done too. So I may have 33 books by the end of this year, which is crazy. I've never tracked how many books I've read, but I feel like this Goodreads challenge definitely pushed me to finish the books that were almost done and get that goal, which is so crazy to me that a stupid goal on a ridiculous website got me to read this many books for no other reason than just to hit the number. I still can't even fathom in my head how dumb it is and how well it worked. Why do we not have these type of goals for everything? I don't know. I'd probably have a million YouTube videos if there was a website dedicated to YouTube goals like this, where it just showed me a little chart in my progress and other friends and their progress, and it was like a competitive thing. Somebody make that. But anyway, I figured I would make this video and just do a quick little blurb about every single book that I read this year. I'm gonna make this really fast. I'm not gonna go into a lot of details. So if you want to actually check out these books, then I just recommend you reading about them on Amazon or Goodreads, or you can always message me and I'll tell you more about them. But these are the books that I read, and actually I would 100% recommend all of these books, which is crazy. I think it's because I am very good about knowing pretty quickly into a book if I don't want to get it, don't want to finish it. I'm not going to force myself. So I do have a couple abandoned books here and there, and I just don't waste my time. So without further ado, I have broken these up into categories. So graphic novels, biographies, fiction, young adult, STEM, so pretty much everything science, tech, medicine, which is not the M in STEM, but I've added medicine because I didn't really have anywhere else to put these. So without further ado, let's get started. Oh, one other thing I want to mention. I do explore every option when reading a book. I have physical books, I do Kindle books, mostly from the library. If you have a library card, oh my goodness. Digital loans from libraries are mind-blowing these days. Like, most of the books that I've read, if I don't own physically, I have just loaned from the library. And it's amazing. You just get a library card from whatever your city is. I have one still from Atlanta, which is amazing because they have a good library. And then I have the LA Public Library, which has like 200,000 ebooks, but it's really hard to get the good ones because there'll be like 100 of them out, or with like loans on them, or like a wait list. That's what I'm trying to say, a wait list. So those kind of take a little bit longer to get, even though the LA library has more, but there's so many people in LA County that makes sense. So I do Kindle books, and then I also do audiobooks because I have an hour commute each way going to work. I have 2 hours every day, and I do podcasts in the morning usually, and then in the afternoon I'll do audiobooks. So I do a lot of audiobooks too. I'll tell you which ones I do on audiobooks, because generally with my audiobooks, I'll choose them based on the narrator, and I'll explain why. Okay, so without further ado, again, let's get started. So I'm gonna start with graphic novels because they're just kind of like my favorite to start with. And I know some people are gonna say those aren't books or you shouldn't count them as real books. I know what you're saying. They're kind of like picture books in a way, and they definitely have less words than other books, but to me they are still books, and on Goodreads they're considered a book, so I'm technically not cheating. But I did, for 2018, I upped my goal to 40 books just to count for graphic novels, so because I did feel kind of like it was a little cheating. But anyway, this one summer is an amazing young adult graphic novel. It is not colorized, as you can see, but the story is so deep. It's about this girl who goes to her summer getaway with her family, and her family is having a hard time, and her friend is there that she sees every summer, and just, it's very realistic and life, and it's not the typical graphic novel that you would expect. This is every ounce of it is real in this book, and you can see it won a Michael Prince Award for Excellence in Young Adult Literature, which is cool. I'm not too sure what that award is, but it was a really quick read, like one sitting, you get through it, but very, very good book, and I'm glad I finally read it. So then I have 3 graphic novels that I read, 2 books of each of them. My favorite by far was Monstrous. This blew my mind. I don't even know why I originally bought it. I think I may have seen it recommended on Amazon, and oh my goodness, I was so blown away. Not only is the artwork beautiful, like just the colors and everything, it's just really, really great. It's a fantastical world, and the main girl, she is a badass and she's battling a lot of demons, and honestly, the whole story in book 1 and 2, there's just so much craziness going on that it's kind of hard to even explain. Highly recommend if you're looking for a new series, because it is new and a lot of people are giving it a lot of praise, so I highly recommend that. The next one is Paper Girls. If you're not familiar with this, Paper Girls is about 4 girls in the 80s who are paper girls, and some crazy stuff starts to go down, and there's some time warping and aliens and all kinds of weirdness that goes on. It's very much so like Stranger Things, except they're female. If you like Stranger Things, you'll probably like this. It is a little slow, I will say, but I did still enjoy it, and I believe the 3rd one is out. I just haven't gotten it yet. And then my absolute most amazing, I've talked about this here on this channel before, Saga. If you have not read Saga, what are you doing with your life? The new one comes out in January. I read them in the books. You could read them as they come out individually, but I prefer to get it in the book. I like to binge shows too. I don't like to watch them one by one, so I'm the same with my comics. Brian K. Vaughan is he's a genius. He's a literary genius, and I highly recommend anything he does. The next category that I'm gonna talk about is young adult. Young adult is not for everybody. The concept of young adult is essentially that the main character in the book is a young adult, so like a teenager, and that is not for everybody. I don't read many young adult books. I'll generally read the ones that are the chart toppers that everyone's talking about, just because I cannot, my curiosity gets in the way and I can't not read it because I just want to know what everybody else is talking about and see if it lives up to the hype. A lot of times they do live up to the hype, which is kind of crazy. Not really, I guess they're on the charts for a reason. I'm a big fan of John Green. I've read all of his books, and he, if you're not familiar with him on YouTube, him and his brother have a channel called The Vlog Brothers, and they've been around forever, and they're just fabulous human beings. And they've created a lot of wonderful educational channels on YouTube, and he wrote The Fault in Our Stars, Paper Towns, which are two that became movies. The Fault in Our Stars is such a cute movie. If you haven't seen it and you like the sentimental type of movies, then I do recommend it, although I'm sure most of you probably aren't that type. But his new book, okay, is also kind of sentimental. Well, I don't know if sentimental is the right word. It's emotional, because Turtles All the Way Down is the only book this year that made me bawl my eyes out. I cried so hard, and I don't even know why. It's just, it's about a girl that has OCD and is battling a lot of issues in her head, and just everything that goes on in her life, and it's so heartbreaking. And you just, I feel like if you're a person that has a lot of empathy, this book will break your heart. And it's actually a really good book to read if you know anybody battling any type of mental disorder or problems. Then this book kind of gives you that insight into what they may be thinking. John Green is admittedly has some issues, and I think his character Hazel in here is a reflection of that. And I read this book in one sitting. I could not put it down. It blew me away, and honestly, it's my favorite book that he's written. And I actually have a signed copy, which is amazing. As soon as it came on Amazon, I'm such a fangirl. As soon as it came on Amazon, I had to purchase it, and he signed a DFTBA, which is Don't Forget to Be Awesome, which is so cheesy, but I love it so much. So then I also read The Phantom Tollbooth. I read this book in 4th grade, and I have this thing where I like to go back and read books that I read in my childhood just to see if they held up. Recently I read A Wrinkle in Time, which is gonna be a movie soon. I also read The Giver, which was one of my favorite books when I was a kid and became a terrible movie. And then I've also just read The Phantom Tollbooth. And if you have children, I don't have children, so I can't share this book with them, but if I did, I would 100% share this book with them as soon as they were able to. It's a kid's book. I mean, there's drawings and the words are very spaced apart. Honestly, I read this in like an hour, but it just has so many good messages on it about how to treat people and how to be kind and good, but it's in a funny, entertaining manner, and obviously it's for kids. But I love this book so much. So if you do have kids, I highly recommend it, and it will always have a place on my shelves. I don't think this book is considered young adult. However, I'm gonna include it in the young adult category. I really enjoyed it. This book gets a lot of hate. It gets a lot of love and it gets a lot of hate. I guess it's, some people love it, some people don't, but I really enjoyed it. It has a lot of 80s references that I really enjoyed. I also wanted to make sure I read it before the movie comes out. The movie comes out next year. It's directed by Steven Spielberg, so hopefully it's good. However, the trailers are kind of weird. They've kind of gotten away from just the 80s themes, and there's like references from all over the place, and so I'm a little hesitant to, I don't know, we'll see how it goes, but I thought it was an entertaining read. You can't take it too seriously. Some people just want to tear it apart, but I enjoyed it. I also read a book called Everything, Everything, and it is a young adult book. It's about a girl who is super sick and she can't go outside. She's pretty much just trapped in her room. She watches the world from her window, and she ends up falling in love with a boy who moves in across the street. I don't know why I read this book. Honestly, it popped up as available through my library, and it was one of the most popular books through the library, so I was like, oh, I'll give it a shot. I don't want to spoil it. It has a big twist in it. Okay, moving on to biography. Biographies are my new favorite genre. I guess the only one I have over here is Satya Nadella's book, Hit Refresh. Satya Nadella, if you're not familiar, is the CEO of Microsoft. He's worked for Microsoft for many, many years and became the CEO I think like 6 or 7 years ago. Don't quote me on that, I've already forgotten. But I saw him speak at Microsoft Ignite in Orlando this year, went there through my work, and I saw him speak and he blew my mind. He's an amazing orator, and there's something very special about him. I don't know if he's just charismatic or if he's good on stage, but so I picked up this book after seeing him at Ignite, and I honestly had a hard time getting through it, but not because it was bad, because it's so dense. There's so much in this book talking about him and how he grew up and his life, and then Microsoft and everything that went down with when they purchased Nokia and how they thought they were going to get into the cell phone market and how that was a big collapse, and where they're going now with AR and quantum computing and just so many exciting things. You can see, I don't know if you can see, but I bookmarked so many pages in this book, and I have so many pages underlined and highlighted. And then, it's so crazy. He's only like halfway through his career. I don't even know. I mean, he's only partway through his career, and he wanted to put what he's learned so far down in a book. And I'm so glad he did, because he has a lot of really great things to say. And you can tell with Microsoft how they've kind of changed things around in the past few years. And that has 100% to do with how he handles things, his compassion for people. He really has empathy for the customers, and I think that's really come across and Microsoft has not really been like that in the past. So you can tell that they've definitely changed, or at least trying to change, and that means a lot. Another biography I read that I had no plans on reading this year, but somehow it fell into my lap, and actually I saw it on the charts endlessly, and I got so tired of seeing it, and I kept thinking, this book looks so dumb. Why is it still on the charts? And then I read it and I was like, oh my god, this is one of the best books I've read this year. And that book I read on Kindle, so I don't have the physical copy because I got it through the library, but is Hillbilly Elegy. And oh my goodness, this book is about, by a guy who grew up in Ohio and parts of Kentucky, and it talks about how he was raised by his parents, who actually didn't end up raising him because they couldn't, because drugs and the whole opioid epidemic, and he was raised by his grandparents and all of the poverty, and how these companies got everyone to move to Ohio, and then they left, and they left everyone behind. The rich people were able to get out, so many people moved to the coast, and that left so many people that couldn't leave. They were trapped there essentially, and they had no work, and so they ended up staying. They have families. Drugs took over. I mean, the opioid epidemic in America is bonkers. How many people are ODing every day? It's insane. And so this book is him growing up and his life, and then how he knew when he graduated high school that he wasn't ready for life. He was not taught the life lessons that he needed, so he went into the Marines. The Marines taught him everything he needed to know: how to pay bills, how to buy a car, how to function. He went to Iraq, he came back, and then he went to college, and then he somehow ended up at Yale Law. And it's just this amazing story about this kid that grew up poor with all these things going against him, and how he overcame all of them. He went to Yale Law, and now he's a successful lawyer and also an author who wrote this amazing book. It does go into a lot of politics and how we got to where we are today, where middle America is, and how different it is to, say, like the coastal areas, and how people are thinking and functioning, and where their heads are. Very, very good book. I do recommend it. In fact, I believe it's becoming a movie directed by Ron Howard, which is going to be really interesting how they do that. We'll see. Hopefully it's good. Ron Howard is generally pretty good. So except for the Dan Brown movies, but we'll get into that in a bit. Another biography I read, well, I listened to, was Joe Biden's new biography, Promise Me Dad. Goodness, about his son that was diagnosed with brain cancer in, I think, 2014, and then Joe Biden's his decision making in eventually not running for president, and about how it was all happening right around the time of having to make that decision of whether he should run or not. His son passed away from brain cancer, and how, oh my goodness, I can't even imagine. I mean, Joe Biden, if you're not familiar with him, he's an amazing senator from Delaware. He's done so much for Delaware. Everybody loves him. I mean, he's just a nice guy. You could just tell from videos, love or hate Obama. It seems like everybody just loved Joe Biden. I actually ended up listening to this book through Audible and not reading it. So I listened to it on my commute, and Joe Biden is actually the narrator of it, and he was fantastic. Another sad book that I read based on cancer, I don't know why this theme of cancer keeps coming up, but The Last Lecture. It's honestly an older book. Well, not really that much older, but it is a little bit older, and if you're not familiar with The Last Lecture, you can actually watch his last lecture on YouTube. He's a professor of computer science. Unfortunately, he was diagnosed with cancer, and he didn't make it. His last lecture and this book are pretty much, he pretty much did for his kids. And what are these sad books? Okay, a happy book. So another biography, this isn't a biography actually, but I'm gonna throw it in here because I don't know where else to throw it, is The Book of Joy, and it is a conversation between the Dalai Lama and the Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and these two amazing leaders are in a room, and they pretty much just are discussing their lives, their faith, the things that are important to them, things that others should be focusing on. You know, a lot of mindfulness, meditation, taking care of yourself. Things that really stuck out to me, it was just always have gratitude in your heart. I mean, the things you have, if you don't have gratitude for them, they're pretty much worthless. So the people in your lives, the things that you have, the things that you're able to do, you should always be thankful for. And then the other one was community, and just how important it is in that as human beings that we have community with each other. And it's just a really great book, especially since they're both getting up there in age, and who knows how much longer we have with them. So it's a very, very, very good book. Okay, this category is STEM, so science, technology, engineering, math. And I've actually replaced math with medicine because I don't have any math books in here, but I do have some medicine books. The first book is The Selfish Gene. This is a thick book. I do not recommend this for the faint of heart because it's very thick. I guess the words aren't, they're not too small, they're kind of average, but I actually didn't read this book. I listened to an audiobook. It's very, very good. It's pretty much about how our genes are programmed to survive, and how they'll do anything they can to survive and to pretty much procreate so that the genes carry on. If you are interested in science, then I do recommend this. Then I read a book called Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday. I've read most of his books. His books are a lot about stoicism and the ego, and this book is pretty much what helped me a lot through YouTube stuff, because it made me realize by pretty much telling me that anytime we're upset by negative comments, internet or not, real life or on the internet, if we're upset by negativity, things like that, it's generally because of our ego and our sense of entitlement that we think we deserve somebody else's kindness. But in reality, we don't deserve anything. We don't deserve anybody's kindness. They don't have to give us any kindness whatsoever. We would hope that instead of being mean or negative, that they would just be silent. But once again, why do we think we're entitled to even their silence? We're not. And it's the ego telling us that we think we're a good person, and just because we think we're a good person, other people should think the same too. But that's not how it works. Not everybody's going to agree with you, and the ego has to be okay with that. I know it's not going to. The ego is the enemy. It's a very good title and it's very appropriate, and I highly recommend it to like everybody in the whole world, because honestly, there's so much entitlement going around in this world that it breaks my heart how much people think they deserve. You deserve nothing. Let me tell you, the world owes you zero. You're lucky enough to even be here. You think the world owes you something? Please. Then I read a book called Being Mortal. The book is by a doctor, and he pretty much talks about a lot of things, but the main thing I took from it is that maybe we're actually not doing people favors that are elderly or really sick with things like cancer, terminal cancer, by keeping them alive longer than the body should be, and how sometimes medicine is actually doing more harm than good, and it's essentially about being mortal and how we are all mortal. Then I read this book, Women in Tech, and if you're a female in tech, I know there's a few of you out there. If you are a female in tech, I highly recommend this book. If you're trying to get a job in tech, if you're looking to get a job in tech, this book has everything from stories from women who do work in technology, then also suggestions from the author, Tara Wheeler, about how to approach an interview, how to ask for a raise, how to learn and grow and find a mentor, and all of these things that are not necessarily taught anywhere. And so I found this book very useful. I also saw her speak at Microsoft Ignite as well, which is an amazing conference. If you work in IT, I highly recommend going to Microsoft Ignite. But I saw her speak at Microsoft Ignite, and she gave a great speech. It was very empowering as a female, and I do recommend it, not just for women, but also if you just want to see it from a female's perspective. I do recommend it just because a change in perspective is always a good thing, to get a more rounded opinion of life and technology and workplace and everything everyone goes through. This is a very good book, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, something that you guys know I fight with all the time, myself and my opinion of myself, and I know a lot of you have the same plight, and it's often very hard to get out of the thought spirals and change the way you're thinking, and this book gives some very good examples and suggestions and exercises in how to break those cycles and literally how to change the way your brain thinks, because when you change the way you think, things change. It's amazing how that works. Two other audiobooks that I did on my commute, The 5-Second Rule, which is a good concept if you make yourself do it. The 5-Second Rule says essentially that you will get things done by doing a countdown. So if there's something you're dreading doing, like the laundry or the dishes or writing a paper, then but you know you have to do it, instead of procrastinating, just start countdowning. Start counting down. So you just do 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then as soon as you hit 1, you go and you do it. The thing with the countdown that's kind of cool, and it does in a way work, is that when you start the countdown, your brain just gets in that mode like, okay, I'm gonna have to go. So when you get to 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go! You go! And it's just kind of like this knee-jerk reaction, and you get more things done. You get more things done, yeah. The problem that I have with doing it is that I just don't do the 5-second countdown. I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. So I'm not going to do the countdown, because I know if I do the countdown, then I'll have to do it. So I just don't do the countdown, which totally defeats the purpose, I know. But this is the dilemma inside my head. The last kind of STEMmy book that I read is Astrophysics for People in a Hurry by Neil deGrasse Tyson. I did listen to it on audiobook. It's a very short book. I do recommend it. I thought it was a very good, quick read, well, listen per se. And actually it's kind of like my go-to. Whenever I can't sleep at night, I'll put headphones on and I'll put that book on, and I kind of just naturally fall asleep to it. Not that it's boring, it just, I don't know, it's something that I don't really, it's not like a story with a plot that I don't want to miss plot points. I mean, the Big Bang, yeah, I don't really, we know that happened, so I don't really need to hear that every time, but it's just a good kind of book to have in the background is what I'm saying. I also randomly read 2 books of poetry this year. I don't know why, I don't know how, it just sort of happened. I kept seeing this woman's book on the Amazon charts and I was like, why is this book on there? And I had no idea it was even poetry, so I actually ended up checking out her first book. Well, first let me tell you, the author is Rupi Kaur, and she got famous by putting poetry on Instagram, and then she ended up writing 2 books. So the first book is the first one I read, Milk and Honey, and oh my god, it blew me away. I had no idea. Like, she's not for everyone, I will say that. Her poetry is a lot about abuse and rape and growing up as a minority and love and heartbreak and all kinds of kind of terrible things, but it's also really good, and it's just a lot of things that women deal with, and I guess probably human beings in general. And so I read that one first, and then the second one, The Sun and Her Stars, that's not the name, and The Sun and Her Flowers, and it's very, very similar, especially when you read them back to back. And but it's also very good, more poetry. So if you don't like poetry, I don't recommend these, but if you do, or if you want to expand your horizons, then I highly recommend Rupi Kaur. And finally, we are to my last category, fiction, which is a very basic category, and I read kind of books all over the place. So the first book I read was a book called Cyberstorm, and this book was really weird. Actually, I listened to it on audiobook. It's probably, I think, the first audiobook I listened to this year, so I listened to it on my commute. And what happens when we lose power? Like, everybody loses power, and it's about this family that lives in New York City, and the power goes out. The whole power grid goes down. In fact, I think the whole country goes down. There are no planes in the sky, the subway's not running, there's no lights, there's no water, there is nothing. And what happens? And everybody's trying to figure it out. If this is an act of terrorism, are we being invaded? All these crazy things happen. I didn't really like the ending. I thought it was kind of a cop-out, but I thought the concept was kind of interesting, and in the end, this made me go out and build like an emergency bag of like water and like a water straw and a solar battery, just in case, I don't know. Then another audiobook. I did a lot of audiobooks. My commute is very long in LA, so if you are familiar with LA or familiar with a commute, then you understand my plight and the need for audiobooks. So this book, I also listened to the audiobook version, and it was The Handmaid's Tale, and I read this because I wanted to watch the show on Hulu, but I wanted to read the book first. I did the audiobook version, and I'm so glad I did because it's narrated by Claire Danes, and she did an amazing job. She's a fabulous actress, and she's just a very emotional actress, and she did a very emotionally good job with this character. It's a very heartbreaking book in a lot of ways to think that we could get to that point as society, and I know it's just fiction, but it's also very scary to think that it is a possibility that things may degrade to that point. So I highly recommend the book. If you don't feel like reading it, then watch the show, because the show is also fabulous. Oh, I almost forgot. I also read this book, Do Androids Dream of Sleep? This has been on my list for a very long time. If you're not familiar, this book is actually the inspiration for Blade Runner. Blade Runner is one of my favorite movies from the 80s. I love Harrison Ford in it, and I have not seen the new one, so I'm super excited to see the new Blade Runner once I can get my hands on it. And this book, oh, it was really good. You can see it's pretty short, so you can probably read it in like 1 or 2 sittings if you are a fast reader. The coolest part about this book is that it was actually written in the 60s. So which is crazy because it was written so long ago. Philip K. Dick had such a crazy vision for the future. Obviously it's very far off, but it's obviously about androids, so robots. They're pretty much indistinguishable between humans, and how there are really no animals anymore, and animals are like just these electric bots that look like animals and you can't really tell, but you kind of can. Goodness, it was a really good book. I'm glad I read it before seeing the new one, and I highly recommend it if you're a fan of sci-fi. He's also the author that did Man in a High Castle, which is the book and show about what the world would be like if Germany did win World War II. So he has a very vivid imagination. A few more books and then we're done. I also read Artemis, which is by Andy Weir, who is the author that wrote The Martian. I read The Martian and I loved it. I thought it was such a good book. I loved the fact that he was combining so much like real deep science with this concept of a man being trapped on Mars and having to survive. The movie was also fantastic and I really enjoyed it, and so I thought I'd enjoy Artemis, and the concept of Artemis was good. I thought it was entertaining. I read it, I finished it pretty quickly, but there was a big issue with Artemis in that first, let me tell you, it's about this woman who lives on the moon. We have like a space station on the moon, people live there, and she's kind of like a courier. And the problem with this book is that Andy Weir wrote this character as if he was like a 14-year-old boy imagining a female character. During the whole book, I kind of got like icky feelings reading it. And then I read the reviews after I finished it, and like everybody was saying the same thing, like, what is the deal with how he wrote this female character? It was just weird. Other than that, I thought the book was very good. And then finally, I read Dan Brown's new book, Origin, and Dan Brown is not for everybody. He's for a lot of people. He's an extremely popular author who wrote The Da Vinci Code, Inferno, a bunch of others that are all escaping me, but those are some big ones. So The Lost Symbol, and they all became movies with Tom Hanks, directed by Ron Howard. Unfortunately, all the movies were pretty terrible. I didn't even bother with Inferno. Inferno is a fabulous book, and I didn't even bother with it. But a lot of people don't like his books either, mostly literary snobs. I don't really consider myself a literary snob, that's for sure. And I enjoy his books. I find them entertaining, they're page turners. I generally get through them really fast, even though they're extremely long, just because they are so entertaining and they pull you in and you just want to know what's happening. And he does a lot of research, and they're just very dense with information, historical facts, and just very interesting. And this book is about a guy who discovers how humans were created in a way, and so it got a lot of religious backlash. I'm not going to go too much into it. You can read it or read the synopsis if you want, but my favorite part is that there was AI in it, and the concept of the AI in the book was very important, and I feel like Elon Musk would be very interested to read this book. I'm sure he doesn't care, but just the concept of AI and how we really need to be careful with where we are taking AI and the direction it's going. Who knows what can happen? So I enjoyed the book, and if you like Dan Brown, then I recommend it. Oh my goodness, I don't think I've ever talked so much in a video before. I'm like losing my voice. I feel really tired. I don't normally talk so much, so I apologize if my words got really long and drawn out and I was saying a lot, or if I wasn't looking at the camera, or if I forgot everything I was saying. I don't even know. A few final notable mentions, books that I'm actually wrapping up right now and may or may not have done before the end of the year. So the first one, The Nightingale, which is fiction. It is about World War II, and it's about these two women that live in France during World War II, and just about love and loss and trying to survive and all these terrible things. The best part about this book is just how it's written. It's beautifully written. The author is just, I've never read anything by her before. I can't even think of her name at the moment. And it's beautiful. And I believe it is becoming a movie, so I do highly recommend this book if you like historical fiction. It's just, I'm not done with it yet, but it's so good. Another book I'm reading right now, and I'm almost done with it. I have, I don't know, maybe 40 pages left in it, so I probably should just include it on this list, is Trevor Noah's book, Born a Crime. Born a Crime. If you're not familiar, he is the host of The Daily Show. He took over after Jon Stewart. I mean, he's no Jon Stewart, but he's still a funny guy. And this book is about him growing up in South Africa, and oh my goodness, he went through a lot of stuff. Not only were his parents abusive, it's all about growing up during apartheid in South Africa as mixed, and just how he really didn't fit in either side. Just the struggle and the poverty, and oh my goodness, South Africa, what a heartbreaking story during apartheid, and then everything that happened after Nelson Mandela was released from prison, and just about how he got himself out of it and that whole experience. But so far, really enjoying it. I thought it's a very good book. And then the last two books that I'm still reading, Benjamin Franklin, which if you're not familiar with Walter Isaacson, oh my goodness, he is probably one of my favorite authors ever. He wrote Steve Jobs, which is fantastic. He wrote a bunch of other books, just came out with Leonardo da Vinci, and so that is definitely coming up next. The only problem with his books is that they're very, very long, so they take a little while to get through, but I had no desire to really read about Benjamin Franklin. I honestly just picked it up for Walter Isaacson, and oh, it's so good. I don't know what it is. He has some like literary sorcery or something that it just makes his every word on every page magic. I don't get it, but it's so good. He's such a good writer. And then I'm also started reading, as much as you can read these books, Tribe of Mentors by Tim Ferriss. I've been following Tim Ferriss since his very first book, The 4-Hour Work Week. I like his books. You can find a lot of wisdom in his books, but there's a lot of, I don't want to say garbage, there's just a lot of filler in the books that you kind of have to weed through to get to the good parts. His podcast is one of the podcasts that I do listen to quite often. He has a lot of really good, interesting guests on, and he's gotten very good at interviewing. And so Tribe of Mentors is pretty much a collection of questions that he's asked some of the people he's interviewed, and just some of their responses. And so it is a good book. I do recommend it if you kind of like hearing what very successful people have to say. I do kind of think Tools of the Titans was better, which is the precursor to this book, but same concept. It's from stories from people he's interviewed on his podcast, but Tribe of Mentors is also very good. But it's one of those books I'm probably never gonna finish. I just kind of like pick through it every once in a while. Well, that just sums it up. I went over every single book that I read this year, and I pretty much lost my voice doing it. That just tells you that I read too much and that I don't talk enough. I hope that if you are a book reader, that you add me on Goodreads and we can be friends and we can share different books with each other and all kinds of fun things. I love books, as you can tell, and I love hearing about what other people are reading as well. So do feel free to share any of that with me on Goodreads or Twitter. Otherwise, if you want to follow me on Instagram or Twitter, my links are in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit that little bell notification so you can see when I do post the videos, because they're kind of all over the place at the moment. Thanks so much for watching. Bye bye.